thank you, and good morning, everyone. It is nice to be back in Korea for another one of our community events. I don't speak Korean very well, so I couldn't understand everything that they were saying, but I could follow the slides, and it's awesome to see the growth of the event and the way that it has expanded to bring in more communities. I really liked seeing the updates from Ceph and Open Compute and Kubernetes and all of these technologies, and I want to talk about that a little bit more today. But first, organizing these events takes a lot of effort, and so I just wanted to thank the volunteers as well. So all of the volunteers who worked on the event who are here, could you stand up? Yes. Stand up. and I just wanted to give you a round of applause. Thank you. If you see anyone in the volunteer shirts, please tell them thank you. 감사합니다. Because putting on an event like this takes a lot of work, and they are spending their time. Many of them were here very late last night and back very early this morning. But ultimately, they do that because it's important to build community and to have people working together and coming together. So thank you for everyone who worked on that. And they're always looking for other people to join them. So if you care about any of these technologies, you should join the different groups and participate and help do these kinds of things. So I said that I wanted to talk a little bit about how all of these different projects and communities and technologies are developing and working. And it's something that's really important to me that I call it collaboration without boundaries. And I think that this is something that is an important topic for our world today. As we look around the world, in some cases we see divisions and people getting divided into different groups and different kind of paths and approaches and priorities. But I think that when we accomplish the most is when we think about how we can collaborate across any of those boundaries that might come up. And I gave a keynote at our OpenStack Summit in Denver a couple of months ago, and I talked about a few things that I have learned in my life. And one of those is that technology is an extremely powerful force for changing our lives. And even now I'm sitting here and I look out and there's phones. People are taking pictures of presentations with their phones. Just 10 years ago, that wasn't really something that that we did. But now our phones are present with us all of the time. It's how we communicate, how we make memories, how we pay, how we work with everything in the world. And that's just one single example of a piece of technology that in a decade has had a huge impact and created a huge change in our life. So for me, if I want to have an impact on the world, I think that the technology industry is one of the most important places that you can do that and where you can work. The other thing that I think I have learned and seen is that collaboration among individuals is another really powerful force for changing our lives. And so collaboration means when you get people together who have a common goal and they work together on that. And so I see that every day in my job because I work in open source. And in open source, what we are trying to do is to get individual software developers to put their code together, to share it, and to all collaborate, to get users from different companies to use that software and to run it within their business. And that's very powerful. And when you combine those two together, then I think you end up with something that we haven't seen too often in our history as humans, which is this incredible opportunity to collaborate from all over the world, from all kinds of different backgrounds and organizations to create technology that helps us. So This is something that like I said, as my job at an open source foundation is to talk about technology and collaboration and to encourage it every day. But I don't think that it's just something for open source and for foundations and for those organizations only. I think it's something that all of us can think about and work on every day in our life. One example that I really like to use is a musical group, which is called the Silk Road Ensemble. And has anyone here heard of Yo-Yo Ma? He's a cellist, Yo-Yo Ma. Okay. So Yo-Yo Ma, he's a classical musician who plays cello, and he's one of the top classical musicians in the world. And so he plays with symphonies all over, in New York and London and in Europe, and he comes from a background of playing standard classical music by Bach and Beethoven and Mozart and others. But a few years ago, he decided that he wanted to do something that was a little bit different. And what he wanted to do was to get together musicians from all over the world to come and collaborate on music together and to sort of bring their perspective, their unique instruments, their culture, and bring all of that together to collaborate instead of just coming together to play a song that Bach wrote 300 years ago or Beethoven or whoever. And so he created this group called the Silk Road Ensemble. And there's a movie about it that's a documentary that's really interesting. And what you see is when they first come together, their differences are difficult to overcome. But as they go through the months, what they create is something very interesting, and it represents each of them, and it brings each of their unique kind of attributes and their unique talents to something that is very exciting and great music. And I think that's an example that's not open source and not technology, but where he brought people from China and Syria and Iran and the US and Spain together to create something. If we think about technology, we see lots and lots of ways that technology is used in this kind of format, especially in science. And so does anyone know what this is? This is the Globe of Innovation, which is at the CERN campus. So CERN is the European Nuclear Research Agency, and they have the Large Hadron Collider, and they have all of these accelerator rings where they accelerate particles to close to the speed of light, and they crash them into each other, and then they analyze what happens to understand what the world is made of, what the universe is made of, how matter works, how all of these kinds of things. And to do that, they have scientists from well over 100 countries who participate there and who help to run these experiments, to collect the data, to interpret the data, as well as facilities all over the world that process the data on different computing platforms. So again, it's another kind of collaboration of people coming together from different institutions, different universities, and different countries. And what we do here is very similar as well. I think we've got some of our Korean leaders in here, actually. But we have a community that comes together from all over the world to try to solve problems and to collaborate. And we heard, from some of the people who have been community contributors and leaders here in Korea. And we're here in this room, and there'll be hundreds of people at the event today going to different sessions. But you're actually part of something even bigger than that. This open infrastructure community has 105,000 people in almost 200 different countries. That's pretty amazing to think about. That's the group of people who have decided we're going to get together and we're going to work to solve problems in cloud computing, in storage, in networking, in security. And so that is awesome to see this kind of participation and excitement all over the world around these technologies. And if you look at the results that have come out of that, If we look at the OpenStack project, for instance, the OpenStack project recently had its 19th release. So this is also a very productive way to work. The OpenStack project is one of the 3 most active open source projects, along with Linux and Chromium. And so, this is a very effective way to produce software, and it's a very effective way to continue to produce software for years and years and years. And the OpenStack market is also, last year was over a $6 billion US commercial market. So companies who are making money buying and selling OpenStack products. So, this is I think something that you can look at the output of the software, the consumption of the software, and the commercialization of the software, and you see that this is a way that that we really can build technology, and it's kind of a different model. Again, similar to, the phones have changed how we interact with the world. Open source, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, has really changed how software and technology is viewed. And I want to dive into that a little bit more. So this is some data from Forrester, the analyst firm, and they talk about, this is from a recent survey they did of what people's primary computing platform is, and you'll notice that it's divided up into about thirds. So as workloads move to cloud computing platforms, they are not just moving to hyperscale cloud providers like AWS and Alibaba and Microsoft. They are also moving to clouds that they are running internally, and we'll hear from some speakers today and tomorrow who are running their own infrastructure. They're moving to partners who have hosted private clouds. They're moving to a multi-cloud model where they do all of those things. And that creates a lot of choice and value for companies, is having those different options. But in order to do that, you have to have technology available to be able to build your own cloud, or to be able to build a cloud along with partners. And that's something that the OpenStack project has done. Now, sometimes people say, well, cloud computing is very innovative. All of the new things are happening at AWS or Azure or Google. But I actually think that this model that I've been talking about of openly collaborating is actually the most innovative model out of all of it and out of anything that's happened in cloud. And I'm going to tell you why I think that. So first of all, the way that we have developed software in our community has been built around this idea of 4 opens. The 4 opens mean that not just the source code of the software uses an open source license, but the process for designing and developing and creating the software happens in the open, which means that all of the ideas that people have are put there in the open and analyzed and considered from the beginning. This doesn't just happen inside of a single organization and then get thrown over the wall. It all happens collectively. And that, some people say, well, that sounds like, it's going to be too complicated, too many cooks in the kitchen. But I think that what actually happens is it creates many, many ideas, and it creates a marketplace where ideas live or die based off of how good they are. If you look at cloud, in the first generation of cloud, there were kind of 2 separate tracks. There was the proprietary track that was led by the hyperscale cloud providers like Amazon and Google, Microsoft, Alibaba. And then there were several open source infrastructure as a service software projects like OpenStack, CloudStack, Eucalyptus, some others. But that whole first generation of cloud was focused on a very basic problem, which was, how do you provision a virtual machine as quickly as possible, right? That's what all of the original cloud offerings were. It was about automating a virtual machine. And for any of those choices, whether you're talking about AWS or OpenStack, at the beginning, it was only very technically advanced companies that could adopt it. AWS had APIs that people had never really experienced before. OpenStack was new software, and you had to have Python developers to run it. And at the same time, it still grew very quickly. So it was very popular and grew very quickly. But that first generation didn't solve all of the problems that people wanted it to solve. What if you have a lot of data that you can't easily move into the cloud? What if you need IPv6 support? What if you want to use some of the new approaches, the new technology approaches like AI and machine learning, or virtualizing your network functions as a telecom provider? There are all kinds of things that first generation of cloud didn't accomplish. But how did those things get solved for the generation of cloud that we're in now? The solutions actually came from open source communities. And I think sometimes people don't realize that. But if we take something like containers and really scaling out containers, that got solved through Docker, Moby, and Kubernetes. That didn't get solved in a product from AWS or Azure. If you look at storage, we heard an update from the Ceph community here in Korea. Ceph has become another very, very largely adopted and very popular open source project that has solved a bunch of storage issues. TensorFlow is the most widely adopted form of doing machine learning and training. And all of those things happened in open source communities. And I think that is really an incredible thing to think about. The innovation that has happened between the first generation of cloud and where we are now has been driven by open source communities. And if you think about like this machine learning example, you can provide everything you need in there using open source technologies from the OpenStack community, from the TensorFlow community, from the Kubernetes community, and on and on and on. And so to me, that is a really, really fascinating thing to watch and to learn from. Now, of course, what we've seen is as these open source communities have come out and have solved different problems, those get pulled into proprietary and hyperscale cloud providers. All of them have a Kubernetes offering now. Many of them have added things like IPv6 support. They've started to add edge computing. So these things get rolled into the offering, and that's great. That's kind of how markets are supposed to work. But if we look out to the future and to where I think we're going to see cloud going over the next 10 years, I think that the trend that we will see and that we can all have an impact on is that open source can continue to drive the big changes and the big improvements if we participate and if we contribute our ideas and our development. And so when we think about what are the differences going to be, I think that the idea of a cloud native tool set, a tool set that runs on top of programmable infrastructure, that uses containers extensively, that is clearly something that's catching on, that has a lot of traction. And to get there, we have some of the basic building blocks already, like Kubernetes, but we need more tools, especially around things like the networking space. And there's a start with some of the service mesh projects, but we need to participate in those. We need to help them mature and help them solve more problems. I think that also one of the big things that we'll see, like that analyst chart that I showed, people are going to want and require multiple kinds of clouds. Sometimes they'll want a centralized cloud. Sometimes they'll want an edge cloud. Sometimes they'll want a cloud in a different country. And so because of that, multiple clouds are going to be the standard, and we need better tools for managing and deploying across multiple clouds. I think that as containers have become more and more widely adopted, people are looking at, okay, how do we make sure that they are isolated, that they are secure, that they have full support for hardware acceleration. And when you start to break apart the container layers, you see things like Kata containers and Firecracker and new open source projects that are driving forward the capabilities of containers. To me, what I really care about, and coming back to my original point, is that I think it's extremely important that open collaboration is a key part of how these technologies develop. Because first of all, I think it produces better results. I think it actually produces more innovation. It tests out that innovation faster. It creates a market where a lot of people can benefit. And a lot of people can take advantage of that technology, either by running it or by building businesses on it. And for me, I think one of the most important things is that I think that it's very important that in our world today, that we all have access to these key technologies. You know, if you think about how we make progress as the human race now, computing is a very important part of science, of medicine, of finance. All of these things depend on technology. And so I don't want a world where key technologies are locked up inside of one country or one company or a handful of institutions like that. And to me, open source is such a powerful, powerful way to help all of us kind of control our destiny and control where things go within the technology industry and within the world. So that's why I believe that if we participate in these communities and we think about how do we build these open collaborations without boundaries to drive technology forward, then we all can have a really powerful impact and change our world and our lives and participate in something that's really awesome. So thank you all for having me again. And I just want to say again, thank you to all the organizers and the participants and the sponsors. The Korea Day events are always some of my favorite to come to. And they only exist because of the work that you all put in. So thank you all and have a great couple of days.